one of the things that I would recommend to you if you want to protect yourself from ideological possession, shall we say, is that when you hear people speak politically and they don't say anything about your responsibilities, you should probably stop listening to them. Because whenever they're trying to offer you something, if it doesn't come along with an equivalent cost, there's something being hidden from you. And they're appealing to the part of you that's, well, I would say, at best adolescent. So, all right, so anyways, he's out there in his little adolescent paradise and with his dopey chums, and back at Pride Rock, things are not good, right? Scar, who's arrogant and refuses to learn and who will not establish a reasonable relationship with the females, all he does is tyrannize over them. He ends up ruling over a completely barren landscape. And that's really what happens in totalitarian states. And we also know, quite interestingly, is that one of the best predictors of economic development in a state is the degree to which they extend rights to women. It's one of the best predictors. And I would say, well, if you're going to tyrannize your own women, you're going to tyrannize everything. You're going to tyrannize ideas, you're going to tyrannize structures. Like, if you have to enslave your own women, you've adapted a pretty damn pathological view of the world, and the probability that that narrow, constrained, restricted viewpoint is going to pay off for you economically is extraordinarily low. So anyways, Scar, it's like what happened in the Soviet Union. You know, part of the reason it collapsed by 1989 is that it just could not move any farther. It was like this really complicated motor that was worn completely out, that no one had ever taken care of, and it just ground to a halt. It just stopped working because it didn't work. And so if you're totalitarian and you won't update your system and adjust it, then it wears out and grinds to a halt and everything becomes unproductive. Now, it's not easy to figure out what makes a society productive, because you might say, well, it's natural resources or something like that. First of all, natural resources are very often a curse to a country because they produce corruption. They call that the Dutch disease. There's a reason for that. You can look it up. But natural resources in and of themselves are by no means sufficient to guarantee the well-being of a country. Japan has virtually no natural resources at all, and it's really rich. And one of the prime natural resources actually seems, maybe there's two. One is honesty, another is trust. And if you can set up a society where people are roughly honest, which means they do what they say they're going to do, and where the default bargaining position on both sides is trust, then the probability that that culture will become wealthy is very, very high. So, and a functional legal system is also a natural resource of tremendous, tremendous value. You know, it's partly why people in China, for example, wealthy people in China, are dumping their money into the real estate market in North America like mad, because one of the things you do know if you buy real estate in North America is you actually own it. It's still going to be yours 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future. There's no doubt about that. And so that fact of ownership is embedded in the functioning legal system. And that's what gives those sorts of properties crazy value. You know, much to the problematic situation for all of you people who are, at some point, most of you are going to try to buy property in Toronto, and that's really going to be entertaining. So now look, the other thing about Scar is he's got the little bird locked up, right? That's the vision of the king. Well, he doesn't want to know anything. He already knows everything. So why does he need this stupid bird flying around telling him what's going on? The last thing he wants to know is what's going on. Yeah. Stalin, I mean, God, you gave that guy bad news or good news, he was going to have you killed. It kept the bad news to a minimum. And that's a real problem, right? Because if you torture people who bring you bad news, then you're never going to learn anything. Well, you don't have to if you already know everything anyways. And so that's the situation here. Well, his little minions, the hyenas, are getting pretty unhappy because they haven't had anything to eat. And the reason for that is they've just stripped the landscape bare, right? And I read at the demise of the Soviet Union that something like 10 to 15% of the entire landmass of the Soviet Union had been rendered permanently uninhabitable by industrial pollution. So, you know, I don't remember if that included Chernobyl.